the appropriate trans or pride flags. So what they're doing here, I mean, look at what they did with regard to the pandemic. They brought in this thing, they immediately were able to identify who all the troublemakers are gonna be, right? The people who would not comply, who would lose their job rather than get injected. It was a masterful way to clean the public service and all of the important places in society, doctors, nurses, paramedics, get rid of the people who are really gonna cause problems, because now we're gonna bring in our people that are gonna be all under this new regime. So this is the same thing. Now in public service, if you don't fly that rainbow flag, if you don't fly that trans flag at your workstation, you are gonna be obviously identified as not being equitable, not being part of the 2030, gender ideology and love and peace. You're a hateful person. So in this as well, we see that the LGBTQ Secretariat. So this is how they are also getting the money out through the public service, because now all these people get to identify what groups are going to get all the funding. So we have documents like this one. This is the federal 2S LGBTQ1 plus report, okay? And this is also where they give all the money. So with just in a few pages of this report, there's 40 million for this, 30 million for that, 20 million, 5.6 million, 11 million, hundreds of millions of dollars going out to promote the prideification of this nation. Now, I jokingly looked up to see if there was such a thing as maybe the Christian public service, and there is. And they very quietly meet at their lunch hour and pray and read their Bibles together. I think we should do a human rights complaint and see if we can get them the same kind of status, right? All right, so some quick facts. We are now moving into all the feminist nonsense. And again, all of this is being done under feminist women, because we know women now can be men dressed up as women, right? So this is where, for business people, they need to start waking up to this. So the budget for 2022 committed $100 million to 2 LGBTQ1 federal action plan, 40 million for new capacity building grants and contributions for 2 LGBTQ. I'm just gonna go alphabet, okay? Community organizations, 35 million project grants and contributions to the alphabet community organizations, another 5.6 to enhance inclusion and address stigma, 7.7 million to conduct new data collection. Okay, now this is important. And then 11.7 million to stabilize and expand the funding for the Alphabet Secretariat. So, I'm not going to go into it today, but one of the things I did during COVID is I took all the grants that were given under COVID, the billions of dollars, and we have a record of them all. And then somebody asked me for how do you access the grant, so I was just going through that document I have, and I noticed this grant that I hadn't looked into. So I think in this one page there's like 85 grants or something. And so I picked like 10 or 15 just to be able to see how ridiculous they are, what they're doing. There's just not enough time in a day to look at all these things. So, and I missed this one. And this was the 50-30 challenge. And I'm thinking, when I saw it, oh, that has to be part of the 2030 agenda, because, we have the 2030, but then most documents will also talk about 2050 as well. No, never assume anything. So I'm starting to read this document. And this is a whole new challenge. So there were 2 budget items in 2017, the smart cities and the 50-30 challenge. So what this does, and this is where everybody who has a business, corporation, investments, nonprofit organization needs to understand what's happening here. And this is how they're doing this coercive constraint. So if you want any government money, you have to abide by these new rules. So let's just go over some of these things. So In 2018, or 2021, there were 1,200 participating organizations in this challenge. So in addition to doing the Smart City Challenge, which is how they got all the municipal governments on it, they gave $55 million to Surrey to create a no accident zone. I do have to call your mayor to see if they actually put that money into that, $55 million. But they also created this, and they gave out $33 million for this. And what they were gonna do is, as we emerge from COVID, so everything's because of COVID, right? What's that? Oh, okay. What time is it now?
8 o'clock.
Oh, okay, good. We emerged from the COVID-19. The government of Canada is working to build a more inclusive, resilient, and more competitive economy that benefits everybody. That includes breaking down existing barriers to full economic participation for all Canadians. In December 2020, Government of Canada launched the 50-30 Challenge, which asked Canadian companies, not-for-profit organizations, and post-secondary institutions to commit to achieving gender parity and significant representation, 30% of underrepresented groups, including racialized persons, Indigenous people, people living with disabilities, and members of the LGBTQ community on corporate boards and in senior management positions. So in 2018, unbeknownst to most people, they changed also the Corporate Registration Act in the federal government. And they now require corporations to report the diversity of their corporate boards. And I don't think many people probably paid too much attention to that, right? Diversity, sure, I've got a few women, you know, and we have, you know, the accountants, you know, from China. How much more diverse can you get? Well, you think by now that people would understand that diversity has very different meanings. And this document, as I went through this, kind of gave us a clue to what was happening. So as you can see now, as of April 3rd, 2023, we have 2,000 organizations part of this. Now when you go through this document and you see all the organizations that supposedly partnered with the government to create this big, wonderful thing that everybody wants, it's all the nonprofit organizations that are getting money, you know, with a few exceptions of like the LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce representatives, right? So very political activists, sex activists, and government-funded organizations. I have a team of people going through those organizations to see how many get government funding. I don't see very many other people, but this is going to affect TELUS, Shaw, all the big corporations, your investments, because anybody who's getting dividends as a result of investments, your boards are going to have to comply with this new diversity requirement, okay? So as we go through this, then we see exactly what they mean by this. And in the document we have here, and you can see all these, we learn what it really means. And again, if any of you want any of these, I can get them to you. So gender parity, 50% women and or non-binary people. That is what your board now has to be made up with if you are going to be a good citizen that's going to get all the benefits of what Trudeau wants you to have. So then on Canadian boards and in senior management. Then goal number 2, significant representation, 30% on Canadian boards. So now we're talking 80% of senior management are members of our equity groups, including those who identify as racialized Black, people of color, visible minorities, people with disabilities, including invisible or episodic disabilities, 2 LGBTQ plus and or gender or sexually diverse individuals, okay? So the state is now making you comply with how you're going to govern your own company, okay? Now, as we move through this document, we start seeing what can happen. These are the things you're going to get if you meet these objectives. Now remember, they tell us right now this is voluntary, but we know how that works, right? So as a corporate diversity honor roll member, so you're going to have lots of parties, your corporation, if you buy into this, you would have access to supportive resources as well as connection with partners who specialize in the recruitment of diverse employees. I love this one. You'll get promotion, marketing, and official achievement recognition. So on the government websites, your corporation's gonna be a proud partner. And again, that's gonna be a selling point. Oh, well, if Bell is part of this, it must be good, right? Inclusion in our official website, I love that one. With supporting materials, preferential access to government programs, funding, and support. So now we see what's gonna happen. Any nonprofit organization, any church with community services that gets funding, unless you have this recipe on your board, right, this criteria, you ain't getting nothing. As a matter of fact, knowing where we're going with digital ID and all the rest of it, you're gonna have social credit demerit points. I should also say that they've also changed some of the acts involving employees as well, so that larger corporations can now issue shares in your company. We used to have profit sharing, which is a great thing, but now the state's coming in and said, you need to spread your community wealth, right? And so they're making this sort of a prerequisite, where again, any corporation or business that doesn't engage in this, you'll either be higher taxed, right? Not registered, whatever. This is just a very, very dangerous precedent we're going. Okay, so I could go on and on about all the different issues that are going on, but I purposely picked these ones because I think it demonstrates areas where we have to say, we're at a bad point here, what are we gonna do about it, and how are we gonna do about it? So I looked at, through the Canadian Voters Association, when we created that, I actually met with a politician who I would say has the right to be the most cynical person in Canada. I won't say his name. And this was in 2020, was it, Judy? Yeah, Judy was with me. And we had dinner with this individual and his wife, and at that point, I was just telling him about the 300k.ca. So back in 2017, pre-pandemic, and by the way, you're looking at the person who has a brochure from 30 years ago warning people about the Emergency Program Act, the Infants Act, and the BC Human Rights Commission. So I'm kind of good at looking ahead and going, we have some problems here, people. So back in 2017, I just saw the writing on the wall. Judy had called me about the SOGI program, and nobody really knew about the SOGI issues or SOGI 123 at that point. Again, it was through our research that we exposed the whole SOGI 123 program, the ARC Foundation, and all the rest of it. Nobody else knew about it. And I looked at what was happening, especially with the abuse that was going on in the public education system. And I thought, unless we have a mass movement of people, and I was thinking 300,000 people back then, we needed it. So I put everything in place. I had the website, brochures, really didn't do much with it, busy. And then you wait for the perfect opportunity. There's opportunities that come along, seasons, the perfect storm, if you will. When we were so successful in getting rid of the NDP in 2001, that was another perfect season. People were fed up, abuse of their tax dollars, abuse of children in the schools, just disregard for the proper democratic process. It kind of gives you an opportunity to mobilize the people, and that's what we did. We traveled around the province, we held town halls, 2,000 to 3,000 people would show up. And I remember one in Prince George, Paul Ramsey, NDP, Minister of Education. We had like 2,500, 30,000 people in the sports arena there, I forget, it was just packed. And he's outside protesting my event with 10 people. Those were the days. But we're at those days again, and that's, I have the privilege right now of meeting with leaders through Zoom calls, hundreds and hundreds of Canadian leaders that are going to tell us what to do, but they haven't been given the tools on how to get it done. We, unlike the other side, and I don't even go political right and left anymore, those days are gone. We are either for your keeping Canada free, sovereign, independent of the globalist nonsense, with respect for democracy and our citizens, or you're part of deconstructing this nation. Those are the two choices that are really before us right now. And so I said to this politician, I said, I can tell you, I really wanted this individual to say, Carrie, nothing's gonna help. Nothing's gonna do it. After 30 years of being, quite often lone voice out on a lot of these issues, and all that goes with it, especially on the LGBT sex activism front. That means death threats, all kinds of nasty things happening to you. It would have been nice if he said, Carrie, too far gone. And I would have happily gone, I'm done, because I did my part. I did all I can do. Instead, midway through dinner, he looked at me, he said, you know what, Carrie, and he's been pretty quiet throughout dinner, and he's got the brochure. He says, this is probably the only thing that will save Canada, right? The mass mobilization of people under one umbrella that vote as a bloc on issues as they relate to freedom, sovereignty, parental rights, sanctity of life. He said, otherwise, it's just not going to work. It's too divided. And that's been orchestrated. The division in this nation is manufactured division. Canadians are probably the kindest, welcoming, unique group, but we're always told that we're hateful, that we're racist, that we're this and we're that. We can't go there, and we can't allow that to happen. So instead he said, no, this is probably the only thing that's going to work, Carrie. And at that point, we were only looking at federal and provincial. And we had a meeting the next morning, and this individual's wife was in the meeting and came in and said, Carrie, before we get started, I have been told to tell you that you have to include municipalities. It's like, I'm looking at this job thinking, okay, federal, I can mobilize people. That's what I can do. Give me the tools and I can move masses. But, then to do it on all the individual municipal fronts, that's going to be a highly orchestrated, unique opportunity. So I'm happy to say through our work, like on Doctors on Tours, traveling the communities and where we have established leaders within each one of these communities. We know who can pull things off. We know who can put together large events. That afternoon I spoke at one of the freedom rallies, and I thought, I'm going to fly this. And I just said, 7 minutes. Guys, here's what's happening. Here's what needs to be done. Are you going to get involved? We had lineups at the table. I've never seen lineups. People just hungry for information. Tell us what to do. My days these days usually start at 4:30 in the morning. With Zoom calls back east, I probably spend at least 5 or 6 hours a day with different groups across the country on various things. Promoting the National Citizens Inquiry, that's another tool for the people. We need to help fund that and support that. That comes to BC in the beginning of May. There's a lot of good things happening, but again, we can only get these things done. We need to put attention to public service campaigns. We need to engage in town halls again. Technology gives us the ability to do that. So we've now acquired the URL Town Hall Live. We'll be holding national town halls and provincial town halls. As we move forward, we're going to start probably the most important campaign, and that's called the vote card. Okay? And it's very simple, issue by issue. People will have access to the tools. This one says, I'm in your riding and I vote, and this is what I stand for, and this is anybody who wants to be my representative has to stand for these things. Issues around Bill 36, we're creating that. I have 50 people have booths at various activities over the next, they all want vote cards to hand out, get signed, and they'll deliver them to their MLAs or their MPs, just depending on what issue we're doing. So vote cards will be a major campaign, whether it's national or provincial, we'll target each one of those things. But again, we can only do that if we're supported. We have to have the tools to be able to do this. It doesn't take much. I don't need all the billions of dollars that are given away, but if we want to stop this lunacy, we have to have some of the tools to be able to do it, right? We have to grow, we have to equip people, we have to be able to buy the vote cards to send to people, because all of this is expensive. Having the websites needed for this costs, $1,400 a month minimum for all the things that are going on. Printing for printers, my monthly cost is expensive to keep this stuff happening. And if we're really concerned about Canada and not just paying lip service to it, we need to invest in our ability to reclaim this nation. And it doesn't take much. I don't need $8 billion, I don't need $8 million, but I do need some money to be able to get this done. So that's an overview. I'll just be happy to take questions if there are any. This video will be available if you want to share it. And Denise, thank you again. It's always good to see you back in the video chair. So Denise traveled with us on the Doctors on Tour. Yay! And the reason why all that is documented for everybody, hundreds of thousands of people were able to see that, is because Denise's constant ability to keep things rolling. So Denise, thank you. All right, we'll turn that off and then we'll take some questions.